Hi, I'm David Goforth with Extension Successful Gardener. During late summer, we've had a drought, a time when our garden vegetables have not performed to their full potential due to lack of water. During times of droughts, there are several strategies that you can use. You can manage the water that's in the root system of the plant a little bit better. You can choose plants that are drought tolerant and know how plants respond to the drought. You can also have water that you've stored above ground, such as in rain barrels, and there's water that's below ground, known as our groundwater. Let's take a look at a few of these things today. We'll start off right here with this small garden that I started off this spring with lettuce. We had lettuce, and then I had some squash in here, and now I've got my late tomatoes in here. And first of all, one of the things I've did here is I've got a lot of organic matter in this soil. This happens to be right beside my compost pile, and as such, some of the organic matter that I've used at times has got over here in this area, and it's very easy to keep a lot of organic matter in here. And so a lot of organic matter will help crops carry a longer time without rain. Of course, to get these late tomatoes going, I had to do some hand irrigation. And what I've done is underneath this mulch right here, I have a little bit of a shallow depression. And so when I put my hose right here, it'll fill up this depression and soak into the ground. And so I'm watering this about once every 4 or 5 days. I'm watering it very good. And then with extra organic matter, it carries it through. And of course, you can see the mulch that I've put out here, some old hay that keeps the sunlight from drying it right back out. A few other techniques is try to water either late in the day or maybe real early in the morning, but not at a time like in the middle of the day where your water is just evaporating back out. And so I have hand watered these and kept them going through the drought. Another technique, though, is to actually get some plants that avoid the drought. And here's some things. I picked all of these this morning. These are vegetable crops for the most part that are good at surviving the drought. And probably the star is the okra right here. This is a plant that originally come from the continent of Africa. I'm not sure exactly where on the continent of Africa that this came from, but it's a very dry season thing. And this is, none of these vegetables here have been irrigated, but this one in particular, it never acted like a drought was on. It continued to grow and provide the a good picking of okra with no irrigation whatsoever during this time when we went 21 days without rain. So this is sort of one of my pet peeves. People talk about native plants are more resistant, and I would say you couldn't find a native vegetable that's any better off than the okra that we get right here. But in addition to okra, another one that has done good here, again, this is with no irrigation whatsoever. I got most of my garden produced earlier, and I haven't been irrigating it here the last 3 weeks, but yet this eggplant has developed very good. This is actually a white eggplant, which is the best variety that I've found. A lot of people like the black one, but then they go home and peel it, so I'm not sure why they want the black color to it, but this particular variety is very good. And the reason a lot of people don't like eggplant is because they allow it to grow too long. It'll get too big and it'll get bitter, and then it, besides being bitter and tough, it's just not that good. So if you'll pick it before it gets old and bitter, and if you'll cook it right, you can enjoy eggplant. Another crop that has done very well here is the hot pepper. This is actually from South America, but you can see right here this one has produced, and in fact it's still blooming and setting young peppers despite the heat that we've had right here. So another one. Now the regular pepper that we have, this is a pepper that I picked this morning, and you can tell it's in bad shape. In fact, it's almost shriveled up. So pepper in itself is not good for the drought, but if you've got pepper, what you can do is allow the plant to stay alive. As long as this plant stays alive and we start getting some rain in September, you can get a late crop of peppers. So even though peppers are not very drought tolerant, the plant, you'd want to keep it alive and allow it to live on. Have got a few in the way of tomatoes right here. The tomatoes, again, they're a crop that would do a lot better with a little bit of irrigation. And so I would prioritize, and if I was really concerned about getting tomatoes during this time of the year, I would water the tomatoes. I will mention another one. This one, like the eggplant, these are peas, what we call peas around here. I think if people up north tend to call them southern peas, or they'll call them some type of pea, but we call them peas or crowder peas here. They're originally from India, and evidently India, like the eggplant, India is a dry place and has to have crops that will tolerate fairly dry conditions, evidently. But these have done real good. Again, they're shorter than normal. This is the tail end of the crop, but These have not had irrigation, and you can see that they have produced again during this time frame. This is a Spanish melon, and it does good in a wide variety of conditions. This one right here again is growing without irrigation. Has been 21 days now without irrigation. It's a little bit before it's full ripe, but you can go ahead and pick them this time, and or let them get just a little bit riper is what you would want to do. But I've got some more out there that will ripen on up. And this Spanish melon, this is a cultivar called Golden Beauty, has done very well for us for the last 4 or 5 years. But again, it's sitting out here with no irrigation, no watering, and it's doing fine. I will mention just a couple of other things. These are the grapes, and bunch grapes, well, all grapes sort of have a reputation for doing fairly well without irrigation. And I think this one may be one that's called Sunbelt out of the Arkansas breeding program. But I've seen these wild out in Texas when we've had temperatures about like we've had around here. They would do fine, and these are doing fine here again without any supplemental irrigation. But perhaps a better crop for this area is the muscadine grapes. They are, again, these have gone just through the drought. You can get both the, what they call the bronze or the white type muscadine, or the black type muscadine. They also have some red colored muscadines that you can order. But the muscadine is a grape that will tolerate these dry conditions very well, and these have gone right on through like there hadn't been a drought, and they're tasting very good taste to the grapes this particular year. So the main thing I'm telling you is that there are some crops out there, if you'll choose your crops, that will do fairly well in dry conditions. Sweet potatoes is one that I haven't mentioned, but sweet potatoes, typically in a year like this, I would expect them to do fairly well. Some years, in fact, perhaps this year, I don't have any sweet potatoes growing, but they may have give you a little bit of cracks, growth cracks in the sweet potatoes in very dry years. But just a typical normal year when we have dry conditions, they will go right through it with no problem at all. So again, if you have a diversity of crops going into your garden, you can do pretty good without when we have dry situations. Let me show you a couple other techniques on storing water for use in your garden. One of the most common things people think about to store a little bit of water is a rain barrel, and I think that is useful in some ways. You want to make sure that you've got a safety situation or a safe situation. If you have small kids around, for example, you wouldn't want to put a 5-gallon bucket out there, because kids can very easily drown in a 5-gallon bucket even with just a few inches of water. They get tipped into it and they can't get out. So you want to get a safe situation as far as that's concerned. And the other thing as far as safety is concerned is what was in the barrel to begin with. If it was food grade material, then that's not a real problem. But I had recently a person, after they had watered the garden, they asked me, is this polyacrylic or something other going to cause a problem? And I wasn't sure. And I thought, well, that's the question you ought to ask before you had watered your vegetables with it. On these rain barrels, what I'm experimenting with here, and I'm not sure this will work yet, but what I've experimented with is putting very small holes like this in the top to drain the water into the barrel. And then I've got a hole right down here about 1 inch or 2 down, so that the water will not stay above this level. It'll come up to here, but then it'll stay down below this level. And what I'm hoping that will do is keep the mosquitoes from laying in here. This hole is small enough till the mosquitoes can't fly down through it. And I don't think if the water is down 1 inch or 2, they'll actually drop eggs down through here to the water. And I'm not sure about that yet, but that's sort of my the reason I'm doing it this way, is to make these holes small enough till the mosquitoes don't go down in them, and hope that they don't have the behavior of dropping their eggs from here just down to the water when the water's down 1 or 2 inches below it. But you take a rain barrel like this, and this is a small amount of water. It will only do a small garden, and what you try to do is take a small garden, maybe 10 square foot, or you know, a 15, 20 square foot garden, and you water it a couple times, and that'll take you down, and hopefully you get a rainstorm to fill it back up to where you can water it again. So you're talking very small amounts of water here, or very small amounts of garden that you can water. But again, it's better than having nothing. And of course, a rain barrel like this, it's also come in handy when the power's been off during times of either ice or windstorms, hurricanes, and things like that. You've got a source of water here at your house for other times, for other uses, as well as for watering your garden and things like that. Another possibility is buying some of these larger agricultural tanks. You can get a 300, 400, 500 gallon tanks at fairly reasonable prices compared to the buying just individual rain barrels. So that's another possibility. It is possible to store some water that you gather off your house, and you could take basically this can fill up from a house. It can fill up with a half-inch rain. You can fill this entire barrel up and have a source of water like that. But perhaps a larger source of water for the average homeowner here in Cabarrus County is the groundwater. And let me show you a little bit about it now. I'm fortunate that I've got a dug well here at the house that I can monitor the groundwater in, and I'm going to measure it here right now. I've got this rope here that I keep for this particular purpose. I don't use it for anything else, and it could also be used again as a bucket. I can lower it down this particular well during times of emergency to get water. Got this little weight that I keep out here also. Okay. There's my mark that I have on here sort of to help me know when I get to the bottom. And you can feel the weight difference when it gets to the bottom. And now I've got to pull it up and see how much of it is in water. Okay, here's the point where it gets wet. Right here, I can lay this out and measure it. A little tape measure here. Basically at this point I've got 43 inches of water in the well. And I can compare that in the journal here of what we've been measuring. Somewheres. Okay, last year at about this same time I had 65 inches of water in the well here, and in May when I started this season had 94 inches of water, and now I've got 42 inches of water here in August. During 2002 it was actually dry during the month of August. So the depth of this well is actually 35 foot and 6 inches deep, and so I can take the subtract out the 42 inches that I've got this time, and that gives me 32 foot down is where my static water level is at. And so this time if you dig a hole anywhere in here, you dig it down to 32 foot, you would find saturated soil at that point. And so the question becomes, how much saturated soil do you have? Well, I've got the clue over here in my other well. My other well has got a plate on it that says the depth of the casing is 79 foot. And when your well is put down correctly, they will take the casing all the way down to bedrock. So that I know that if I dig down, like I said, 32 foot here, I will find saturated soil. And then if I dig down 79 foot, I will find bedrock. And so between the 32 foot and the 79 foot, I've got that much saturated soil that is holding water underneath here that I could use for different purposes. Now this water goes basically from the creek. There's a creek down this way, and then there's another creek over this way. And so between the creeks here, that amount of soil is contained in that water here. And so everybody that's on this side of the creek, which we've got 4 wells or 5 wells on this side of the creek, all 5 households are pulling out of the same water, which is not too bad out here in a rural area. You get into the middle of town, you can have too many people pulling out of the same water, and you actually can't, you can actually overutilize the water that we've got. So that's where the water is at in our soils. Here's the saturated soil. We don't have any other different kinds of aquifers here, if you drill on down below bedrock, there's going to be no more water down there. The water is actually in cracks. Probably the best place to see this is to go and read gold mine. You go and read gold mine, you look at the walls, you don't actually see the cracks. The cracks are too small to see, but the water will seep down through them, and that's where our wells come from. The total depth of a well is around 200 foot, but there's no additional water really to mount anything between the 79 foot where the bedrock starts and the 200 foot where the well is at. That just allows it to enter more of these cracks, and you'll get more water coming into the well when that happens. And so I've got a source of water underneath here that I should be able to manage, and I can measure it and keep a count on it here. Now, if you just got a regular well, it's a little bit harder to measure it, but the same way you can fix it so that you can drop a weight down it and then pull that weight back out, and that will allow you to measure the static water level. And that's what you need to keep up with, is the difference between the static water level and a bedrock, which is the depth of casing in a properly constructed well, and that distance there will tell you how much water you've got available to pull out for irrigation for other uses. Let me mention one other thing here. If you'll notice the lawn around here, the lawn is going brown, and the tall fescue in here, for the most part, I can still find a few green blades here and yonder, but for the most part the tall fescue is brown. It's been brown for 2 or 3 weeks now, but it's not dead. As long as that tall fescue will get a ½ inch of rain every 3 or 4 weeks, it will stay alive, and it'll come back in September. If this weather system changes, we start getting rain by the end of September, this fescue will green right back up. And so to me, it just doesn't make sense for us to irrigate fescue lawns and try to keep them green during a drought like we're having this year. It just doesn't make sense to treat water, to ship water, to move water, and then blow it back out on lawns like that. Allow the lawn to go dormant, let it get the rainfall every once in a while to keep it alive, and it'll come back and perform for you during times when we've got some better conditions. If you've got any questions about droughts, give me a call at the office. And until next time, plan and plant for a better world.